Thank you very much for coming along to listen to my presentation. The argument I want to make is in support of the conference theme and the insights behind it. Particularly, I want to propose that cybernetics is not just a way of thinking, it should also be considered as a way of acting. I'd like to start with this quote. It comes from Margaret Mead's paper, The Cybernetics of Cybernetics, that was presented at the first ASC conference in 1968. This part of her presentation at the very end is actually the part that refers to the cybernetics of cybernetics, of all the silly ideas, to apply the ideas on the basis of which the society was being formed to itself. This for me is at the heart of the understanding of what cybernetics is.
It's a relationship
where observation is very inclusive. I use the word observation because as soon as you say observed or observing, you've left something out, which I don't want to leave out. It's a very big, broad space.
Now, second-order cybernetics came from the cybernetics of cybernetics. Heinz von Förster described second-order cybernetics, or distinguished it from first-order, in the following way. He said, first-order cybernetics is the cybernetics of observed systems. Second-order cybernetics is the cybernetics of observing systems. And I again have used my device of prepositions to distinguish them, to talk about the difference of having the observer of a system and the observer in the system. The observer in the system being the second-order cybernetic observer.
The focus was on systems that do the observing, and that do the thinking, and that do the exploiting and all that. So that was the second-order cybernetics, which is all based on self-organization.
And Heinz also insisted that an observing system requires an observer. That is to say that this detached observer, who retains a certain coolness and so on, is not really part of the second-order cybernetic world.
He's my guy, she knew what he did, yeah. Didn't take him seriously.
He's not eating loose nuts.
I'll talk about how I understand what Mead was asking us to do. We should behave in the way that we, of the systems that we describe. In other words, that we should reflect our cybernetics within and into the ASC. Do what we are talking about. Walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And finally, we should be using approaches that are cybernetic in their manner. So we should be talking about interaction, we should be conversational, not exclusively of course, but certainly we should give space to these sorts of ways of being together, these cybernetic ways.
Right on, right on.
We talked about form, we talked about the decay of form, we talked about the retardation of that decay when we wish to conserve something we value. We talked about the form of values and desires as constraints. We talked about individual place and positioning as creating awareness of sets of values and desires as constraints. We talked about social form as emerging from conversation rather than power relationships. And we talked about how to initiate or trigger such conversations as we move toward the desirable.
The problem is that we're still in this Shannon information age. Shannon messaging means that you're going to send me something that I can already expect. And all I have to do is figure out, did you mean this or that? That or that or that or that or that or that. But The Shannon model doesn't allow me to understand how I can know something new.
In a conversation, say about that video camera or the other one which I see backing it up, I don't know you guys, or is there another one waiting around? Well, what happens is that we learn more about each other, you and I of you. We learn how we not only agree about the nature of a couple of somewhatly different oriented video cameras, but we also learn how we disagree. And in so doing, we learn about each other. And we do that at darn sight more than we learn about video cameras.
Conversation. Turning together in a willingness to embrace asynchronicity so that something new may emerge.
If you take each end carefully, and I'll get out of the way. Oh. Where did that come from?
How would you undo that?
How would I undo it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd take a scissors and I would go.
Other than that, without cutting it.
Well, let's see. If she hands it back to me, it might get undone. It did.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So we can exchange back and forth. We can have a conversation where we exchange
Exactly. You deal with the knot and through the conversation and going back and forth through conversation, the knot disappears.
I like the idea of conversations that are both logocentric and non-logocentric. So I can have a conversation where I'm talking with somebody, but I can have a conversation through material substrates, or I can have a conversation through using films, or I can have a conversation through lighting systems like musical.
Now, I can say this dogmatically because I took care that a whole lot of research effort would not be wasted by making sure that my participants in a conversation or in a more general phenomenon which might involve corporations, might involve societies, nations, politicians, whatever, could be identified with participants, every one of them, if they had these simple properties: organizational closure, informational openness, evolution in a mystery. A mystery. That is, I don't know what time it is, nor do you. And I don't believe in it anyhow. It's a very simplistic view of the world. Now that's my first point. Now, how long do I have, please? Another 15 minutes. Very good. Could you give me a 5-minute cue?
I will.
Thank you. Now, I don't believe in time.
Today is Friday, the 26th.
Let me show you something here, okay?
No, that's Saturday. Today is Friday. The defensive opponent! Acing the other way.
It's fine, right where it is, just leave it.
2 questions. 1, when can conversation be subversive without appearing subversive and hence dismissed? And what guidelines or ethics can help sustain such a process?
I hope that you will take the idea that we might consider living in cybernetics carefully and seriously.
So from my point of view, thank you very much. Robert?
The last 2 days have been about, of course, the idea of living in cybernetics.
Living in cybernetics and applying cybernetics assumes that it's there. It's the last word. And I think that is something that I would like to avoid. That's what religion is about.
Thank you.
Bye.